Welcome to the RMM Talkshow. I'm Rita Isiba, and together with my lovely co-host Margareta Sailer, we explore strategies and share insights in that redefine meaningful management.
We'll be talking about new work, inclusive leadership with a real emphasis on employee experience and engagement.
And today, together, we're diving deep into the topic that affects all of us, unconscious bias and its impact on engagement. And unconscious bias is something that we all have. I mean, people that actually say, I don't have no bias, I just look at them and I think to myself, really? That itself is bias, right? And so it's very interesting that this topic is becoming more and more relevant, especially in terms of, the trend of making sure that you have a diverse and inclusive workforce. Yeah. The thing is that I always tell people that diversity is already there.
Yeah.
The importance is to make sure that there is nobody that is left behind.
That's right.
That nobody feels excluded. Yeah. And that's where the inclusion part comes into it. Completely. But the thing is that diversity and inclusion cannot work if everyone is still biased. And the thing is that we all have an element of unconscious bias in us. So I'm really excited that we can kind of explore this topic, how it impacts engagement and the steps that we can take to address it. I mean, I would really love to hear from the audience as well, how they came to the understanding of unconscious bias and what they do to mitigate the risks.
Yeah, completely.
Have you got any examples?
I think examples, there's so many, to be honest, because like you said, I couldn't say that I don't have an unconscious bias, but I do. But I think one thing when we think of workplaces and workplace cultures, actually unconscious bias in leadership is as important, if not much, than in your workforce. Because obviously you create a certain culture, or you want to create a certain work culture, you really need to make sure that your leaders are aware of their unconscious bias as much as I'm aware of mine and you're aware of yours, and some new ones come up, they're just never ending really. And then once they come up, you can work with it, because quite often with unconscious bias, if you don't understand it, you can't work with it. And it's something that is a constant reminder. But so we're having a lot of questions for you today to talk to you about this very important topic. So basically, my very first question about unconscious bias, right, and how it impacts engagement, because that's really an important thing, is what is actually unconscious bias, if we want to share with the audience, and how does it influence our decision?
I try not to go too scientific because it's the way we are wired. The fact is that unconscious bias, which is really weirdly to say, is actually a safety mechanism.
Right.
Back in the days, before we were what we consider civilized, we had unconscious bias to protect ourselves, because if someone approaches you outside of your tribe, or if there's some sort of object or animal that was foreign to you, you had to have this unconscious bias in order to act accordingly. Because in a nutshell, unconscious bias is to tap into something that you already know. Unconscious bias is when our brains make quick judgments about people or things without us even knowing it, right? For example, when you grab an outfit, perhaps the first thing you grab is your favorite color. And, you don't really think about it, but you have a tendency to your favorite color. And the same thing is with people. We have a tendency to be attracted to people who are very similar to us. And this has layers as well. So this similarity can be either external, or the fact that you only hang out with people who are academics, for example, or you just hang out with people who all have, I don't know, their lips made, and just being superficial here.
Right.
So you tend to hang with the people that you really know. So just to break it down, it's kind of like having a favorite color and thinking things of that color is better, even if it's not really true.
You start favoring somebody, something. Completely.
Exactly. And you know what happens in an organization if there's an unconscious bias thriving, right? So you attract people that all look similar to you. You attract people that think similar to you. How on earth can you produce a new product or new ideas if everyone thinks the same? And that's just one element of it. Unconscious bias can also destroy elements of you feeling included as well. Because if people have this predisposition that you are, I don't know, a dominant, arrogant woman, because a lot of very self-confident women are quite often seen as arrogant, and you have that predisposition that this unconscious bias that this woman is arrogant, rather than actually delving a little bit deeper to realize actually she's just confident in her own skin. So I believe unconscious bias is very, very crucial to be recognized and to be tackled.
Yeah, completely. I think also when you think about unconscious bias in leadership specifically, you know, as a leader, you want to attract, you know, like we talked about another episode, you know, attracting talent. You want to attract the key talent, but also you want to retain it, right? And you need to make sure as a leader specifically that you understand unconscious bias and you work with your team, because you know your managers might treat some employees unfair to others just because there's an unconscious bias, isn't it? Is there anything else you want to add? Because I have plenty of more questions for you.
Of course. I'm just thinking about an opportunity of where I was able to recognize unconscious bias, and that turned out or flipped it into an opportunity for me to hold a workshop as well. Because sometimes I'm brought into an organization just to help foster a form of team culture, and for me it's very, very quickly I recognize unconscious bias in various aspects. Sometimes I ask to see the job descriptions that they have as well, because in the job descriptions, the way you formulate your description of bringing in a person, that can also have elements of unconscious bias. It's really important, for example, not to emphasize on having a picture on a CV. Believe it or not, Austria is one of the few countries in this world that still requests a picture on a CV.
The bigger the better.
It's nuts, to be fully honest. But I hope us mentioning this could kind of change things around. And unfortunately, we also have a tendency to be biased towards people with names that sound foreign. So this can apply everywhere, right? If you happen to be, I don't know, in Africa, and your name is Schmidt-Bauer, perhaps, not even perhaps, most likely the recruiter, if not unconscious bias trained, will rather look for someone with the name of, I don't know, let me just use mine, Isiba, right? Because it's more familiar, and therefore they would rather invite someone to speak to for an interview. Right?
Feels familiar, feels comfortable, doesn't it?
I mean, you're in the field of recruitment. I'm pretty sure you've come across that situation as well.
Yeah, I have, and I do that very, very often. And these days, there's even software that can help you, for example, when you're hiring managers, to actually look just at the CV, and the name of the person isn't visible to you, no picture is visible to you, nothing. So that one part of your unconscious bias is actually automatically removed, because you're then only looking at the skills. You're only looking at what universities they have or what they have achieved, depending on how the CV is written.
That's really good.
It is, isn't it?
Without endorsing, can you name one of the softwares?
Oh God, there's so many, to be honest with you. And on the top of my head, I can't remember one.
Don't worry about
Sorry.
it. I mean,
but there's so many. Honestly, just go and look for software that are able to remove the names and things like that. And some already have them inbuilt, and some of them you have to buy specific software. But they always integrate. So
I think what we could also do is that we can explore some of the softwares that you've used in the past, and then we can just add them onto the show notes for our audience to reference to. So, but anyway, I wanted to tell the story where I was invited by an organization that had issues of of communication and team spirit, but actually the issue was unconscious biasness within the organization. So I was able to hold a workshop, and I used everyday examples, and I love to refer to the fact that it's really, really easy to distinguish between your presumption that someone is arrogant,
Right.
but really and truly the person is just confident,
right?
and it usually applies with us women, unfortunately. So I think I love to highlight this example. And I've also mentioned the example of making sure that you eliminate this within your hiring strategy as well, which is also really important. And of course, you mentioned it earlier as well, to make sure that the management is aware as well that they don't treat some people more fairly than others as well, because unfortunately we're predispositioned on that as well.
Yeah, no, completely.
So I'm open for your next question.
Cool. How do biases impact the way people feel included and engaged?
Biases can make some people feel left out. I mentioned some examples earlier as well, and I'm pretty sure that some members of our audience can relate to this as well, that when you come in as a new employee or you're a new member of a team, you kind of have to prove yourself, right? Because everyone has an assumption of who you are.
Yeah.
We tend to judge from the exterior and also the way you communicate as well. If you, for example, have a tendency to have a very high voice, unfortunately, people, especially men, have a tendency to shut down and don't listen.
Right.
And there has been a lot of research as well that many people associate women with high voices with their mothers nagging them when they were young. So that's the reason why a lot of females who are in leadership, it's very, very recommendable that they actually do training with their voices as well. I don't know why, but for some bizarre reason, when you have a deeper voice and you speak more slowly, people will respect you more. Maybe because you sound more intellectual, or because we are wired to think that when someone speaks slower and if someone has a deeper voice.
It's kind of like when we have lived in environments, and we still do, where we obviously have a lot male we have male individuals in those leadership roles. So by definition, they talk slower. By definition, they're very confident. By definition, they have a deep voice. But if I think about, being a new employee and joining a company, think about all the stress you already have. It doesn't matter what part of your career you are. If you're at the beginning, the middle, the end, it's still a stressful situation.
Absolutely.
And actually really thinking about how the unconscious bias impacts all of that is a good thing to do, because if you look at it specifically, you can create a more safer environment so people don't get upset or
It goes both ways, actually. You're absolutely right. It's very stressful for the person who is coming into the team and to make presumption of this new person, but it's also stressful for the existing team because the dynamic has changed. When you're in a team, everything works well, everyone knows their role, but you know what it's like. You don't know what this person is like. Is this person going to be a disruptor? How long are they going to take in order to be able to join the mill and the machine and how the team works? Just simply think about a group band, a boy group. I want to say boy bands, and a new person joining in.
K-pop.
K-pop is an example. I don't listen to K-pop. Maybe I should do, because everyone likes it so much. So there must be some tunes that I'll probably boogie to. But it's the same example. When you have another person joining a boy band, people have high expectations and they're quite worried. What does that, how will it change the tunes as well, right? So unconscious bias and its impact on engagement is definitely relevant.
You know, one thing that I feel does work quite well when you bring new people into a company, and when you deal with your team that will have an unconscious bias and may be scared, it's always good to communicate a lot with them and tell them about the person that is joining, and make that announcement with your team first, and tell them about the experiences and what job they have. Be clear, communicate. You know, communication is such key. You know, even with your candidate coming in, to explain what the team is like, how many people they're meeting, what the first day is going to be like, what they need to wear. So actually you want to over communicate to help them, so they're not focusing on you know, their unconscious bias, or they don't even hit them in the team or not. So it's always good to go the extra mile.
I couldn't agree more. Do everything possible to eliminate the assumptions. And I think that starts from onboarding.
Yeah. And actually that would bring us to our next questions, unless you have anything you want to add. No. But what can organizations do to reduce the unconscious bias? So what do you have there from your experience?
So I love to list them down to 6 factors. And I would really love to hear from the audience as well what they actually do. But first and foremost, you got to learn about bias. There's so many different types of biases, right? I don't want to list them all. You can read it up yourself. But most importantly, the umbrella is that you need to be aware that you have unconscious bias, and you need to make sure that you eliminate it. And you can do that by just speaking to people, right? Speaking to people who are not usually within your circle. I have a great example as well, which actually is relevant to my life. Once I picked up my daughter from kindergarten, and I got into small talk with one of the mothers there. And I must have said something really, now in hindsight, really stupid, because I was referring to the child's father. And she said, "There's no father." And then I said, "Oh, okay, I respect you. You're raising your child on your own. Respect, because I wouldn't know how you do it." She was like, "No, my partner is a woman. We're both mothers. Our son has 2 mothers." I could have kicked myself, because here I am teaching other people about unconscious bias. And that was just, for me, one perfect example. Why on earth did I assume that...
We're only humans, though.
I know. But, you know, I really wanted to put the foot in my own mouth, right? That why did I assume, first and foremost, that, you know, her partner is a man. And the second thing that I assumed was that that she's perhaps raising her child on her own, right? That I didn't even think the fact that perhaps she's in a relationship where both of them have the same gender. So this is just one of the typical encounters of unconscious bias as well, and to show that I'm not immune to it as well, even though I really read up onto this topic and I actually teach it as well. So, and another thing as well is to make sure that in your code of conduct, you implement the rules as well about unconscious bias. But of course, if you implement the rules, you need to make sure that the staff is also trained on how to recognize and how to address unconscious bias. So I think this also is a responsibility of the organization to ensure that there is continuing skills development to this topic. But of course, you as an individual need to make sure as well that you know, make yourself familiar to this topic too. And I mentioned earlier to make sure that you speak with people from all different backgrounds. This can also be facilitated by mixing up the teams. If you mix up the teams and you speak to people who you don't usually speak to, and it can be someone, for example, from finance, right? And you happen to be in the marketing department, right? And it's always interesting to hear the perspective of someone who's in finance, which is very different to someone who's in the marketing department. So along this diversity can eliminate unconscious bias. So I'm a big advocate of mixing up the teams, especially when it comes to solving solutions as well. Love it. And another tip that I have as well is to eliminate consensus,
Okay.
public consensus.
Right.
I am also a big advocate of making anonymous decisions.
Yeah,
And there's
agreed.
so many tools
Yeah.
that you can use nowadays in workshops or in big town hall meetings, that when the decision needs to be made, a collective one, or you are trying to get the buy-in from various people, to make sure that it's done anonymously.
Yeah.
That is the most authentic way in finding a solution to a problem. Because we tend to go with the decisions of the most dominant individuals of a group. It's just human nature.
Yeah.
And also because we have a tendency to be nervous of being frowned upon because you went against the group decision.
Yeah.
This person always has an issue with something.
Yeah.
That the person tends to be outcasted because they have a different opinion
Right.
on what the group says. And this boils back onto the topic of unconscious bias, because groupthink
Yes.
is a form of unconscious bias as well.
It is.
And it can be applied in all aspects of life. We are very nervous to make our own decisions or to think sometimes on our own, to believe certain aspects with researching it yourself.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that many things that are trending right now, people didn't actually sit down and think about it.
It's true. The time to reflect is so important, isn't it? Everything you do, sitting and taking that little bit of time to reflect makes such a difference, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And reflection is also a way of eliminating unconscious bias as well. But, we live in times where everything is fast, so sometimes you don't really have that time to reflect. But if you do, it can really come bearing fruits.
Yeah, completely.
So I'm just trying to think about another point, but to be fully honest, all I can think about right now is training and workshop. Trainings and workshop are crucial because there's always a specialist that tries to keep themselves informed to the elements of unconscious bias, because there's always new things that come. Right now, what is really trending is the matter of transsexuality, right?
Yeah,
of what is really a woman.
Yes.
And if you don't really have the knowledge, then your bias pops up as well. And in the past, it was also different aspects of, during the corona time, about the immunization and vaccinations as well.
Yes.
But let me not even get there, because I think I'm opening I'm opening Pandora's box.
Exactly.
But what leadership can also do, and I'm going to wrap it up here, what leaderships can also do, they can also make sure that they give their staff feedback, and they also receive feedback as well, and also to check in. Yeah. I know it sounds weird, right? Yeah. That feedback is a way of addressing unconscious bias. But if you're a victim of unconscious bias, quite often you keep it to yourself.
Yeah. And you want to hear from the people that are affected by it.
Exactly.
Not just everybody else who thinks that they may be.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. I love it. Thank you for sharing these 6 steps with us. I think they make perfect sense, and they are so helpful to any organization to sort of, take it to the next level when it comes to unconscious bias and the impact as well. But here comes a more personal question, because I always love a personal story. And I was wondering if you could share an experience that you may have had, how unconscious bias affected you in your work experience, or...
This is such a loaded question.
Where are we going with this?
I don't know which element, because, as a Black woman in Austria, I am I'm a unicorn almost, right? Okay. If I don't experience the other end of the stick of being biased upon, I don't even know if that's the word. Nope, I think there's something going wrong here, because I'm so used to people making presumptions about me, and it could just be something very, very minor, like me stepping into a room, everyone speaking German, and then they trying to be nice by switching to English.
True.
Because their assumption is that I don't speak German.
True.
So that is just a typical element of unconscious bias.
Fair enough.
Or another one that I can use is, and I think I've mentioned this several times before, I consider myself very confident, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I can be nervous, but I know how to push it down.
Yeah.
I've mastered that skill, and I guess some people are not used to that.
Right.
That I speak my opinion, that perhaps I walk with a swag, that I can kind of give it back.
Yes.
I think a lot of people may not be used to that, and they may consider me more as arrogant. Yes. But you know what? I'd rather be arrogant than anything else if you think that I am, my God.
Arrogant in the slightest, though. But it's true. It is a complete unconscious bias. If you would, see you from the outside and you wouldn't really get to know a person, but that teaches us, we can't judge books by the covers.
Exactly.
It's all about getting behind the pages, turning that page.
Love that.
Just figuring it out and being curious, really. And that's also, removing unconscious bias is by having a conversation.
Yes.
Like you said before, be curious, get to know the other person. Yes. We're all a lot more alike than we actually think. We all have the same fears. We all have the same needs. It's like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We want to be heard. We want to be accepted. We want to be engaged. Love it. Well, thank you for sharing that. It is, it's a journey. But as we are talking about these topics and people are outside talking about these topics, people are interested. They it's good to talk about it, be honest about it, and figure out solutions together. Thank you.
I would love to hear from the audience as well, some of their personal stories as well, because I love to learn from these stories.
Absolutely. Drop them in the comment section.
Thank you for joining us in this discussion. That's it for today's episode.
Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for more insights and inspiration on building inclusive and engaged organizations.
Until next time, remember that inclusivity isn't just a goal.
It's the key to unlocking the future potential of people.